Now hear the word of the Lord from Hebrews 7:15 through 28. This change has been made very clear since a different priest who is like Melchizedek has appeared. Jesus became a priest not by meeting the physical requirement of belonging to the tribe of Levi, but by the power of a life that cannot be destroyed. And the psalmist pointed this out when he prophesied, "You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." Yes, the old requirement about the priesthood was set aside because it was weak and useless, for the law never made anything perfect. But now we have confidence in a better hope through which we draw near to God. This new system was established with a solemn oath. Aaron's descendants became priests without such an oath, but there was an oath regarding Jesus, for God said to him, "The Lord has taken an oath and will not break his vow. You are a priest forever." Because of this oath, Jesus is the one who guarantees this better covenant with God. There were many priests under the old system, for death prevented them from remaining in office. But because Jesus lives forever, his priesthood lasts forever. Therefore, he is able once and forever to save those who come to God through him. He lives forever to intercede with God on their behalf. He is the kind of high priest we need because he is holy and blameless, unstained by sin. He has been set apart from sinners and has been given the highest place of honor in heaven. Unlike those other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices every day. They did this for their own sins first and then for the sins of the people. But Jesus did this once and for all when he offered himself as the sacrifice for the people's sins. The law appointed high priests who were limited by human weakness. But after the law was given, God appointed his Son with an oath, and his Son has been made the perfect high priest forever. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Good morning, Sojourn. Peace be with you. It's good to see you. It's good to be with you guys this morning. My name is Jonah. If you're visiting with us, I'm one of the pastors here at Sojourn. Our mission as a church is to reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's the good news of who he is and what he's done for us. Build one another up as his church and send each other to follow him in his world. And I'm thankful you're here to be a part of that. Real quick, tonight, if you heard Kristin just mention that, we have calling it a listening session. If you're like, what do you do at a listening session? We're going to listen to one another about what you may ask. So our church for a while has been in partnership with the Southern Baptist Convention, and we're gathering tonight to hear everybody's kind of perspectives and opinions on that partnership. What's going well about it, what's not going well about it. It's at 6 p.m. tonight. If you can't make it, just to be real clear, this is a listening session. It's not a decision session. It's not a plan session. There's no decisions. There's no plan for the way forward. This is truly a decision we want to make together, and we want to hear from everybody. So that'll start at 6 p.m. We've got 2 hours slotted for it, and maybe it won't take that long. The way we've been talking about it is there will be frank discussions of adult topics, probably. Let the reader understand. So if you have children, you make the decision on whether or not your children are ready for what may be talked about tonight. And I hope you can make it. If you can't and you still want to be a part of the conversation, we really want all of our members to come. Everybody is invited. We're really hoping the members can be here tonight. And if you can't make it tonight, the first Wednesday in March, I believe it's March 6th, but that first week in March, we're doing another listening session over Zoom. So you'll have a chance there to chime in, and we'd love to hear from you. Chapter 7, we keep talking about Melchizedek here. It's a big deal in this section of Hebrews. And really, there's kind of one big thing amidst some of the confusion and strangeness of we're talking about priests and covenants and the tabernacle and all this. The big thing for you to leave with today and hopefully to reflect on later is the reality that you and I have to become a people that lay down our way of doing things and learn instead to trust our great high priest. There is a way of living that seems right to a person. We often have ideas that sound good, and in the end, it often leads to death, whether that's physical, spiritual, relational, and we must learn to become a people that lay down our way of being a me and instead learn to trust our great high priest. Another way to think about it, especially if you come this morning and you're in a bit of a mess, or you're frustrated or dissatisfied, the things that got you into that mess are not going to be the things that get you out of it. Amen? Understand? You ever paid somebody a lot of money, about $150 an hour, to tell you that? The stuff that got you here is not going to be the stuff that gets you out of it. We began talking about this last week a bit. We considered the deep dissatisfaction that plagues most if not all of us. The great Sisyphean experience, if you remember Sisyphus rolling the same stone up a hill every day. A life of struggle, chasing the wind only to be left dissatisfied. Anybody ever been the recipient of the old carrot dangle? Maybe you've had that happen at work, overpromised, underdelivered. If you do this, we'll give you this. Well, next quarter we'll give it to you. Or, well, actually, just keep doing it, and then we'll give it to you. And you keep chasing that dangling carrot, and you find yourself dissatisfied. We considered last week the old priesthood, entrusted with old sacrifices to purify us before God, an old covenant requiring us to keep an old law enacted through old sacrifices. And whether it be for the ancient people of Israel or for us, it just doesn't work the way we thought it would. The old priests offered sacrifices for us, but also for themselves. Those priests, they died like us, they sinned like us, they presented sacrifices on man-made tables inside of man-made tents and man-made buildings. Our old problem of perpetual dissatisfaction could not be solved under the old system. So we ended last week learning about a new priest, an unexpected priest, one who came not from the tribe of Levi, which is where priests were supposed to come from. No, listen, verses 15 through 16 says it again. This change has been made very clear since a different high priest, who's like Melchizedek, has appeared. Jesus became a priest, not by meeting the physical requirement of belonging to the tribe of Levi, but by the power of a life that cannot be destroyed. So, last week we talked about these old problems that we have. The old ones meaning the persistent ones, the ones that keep cropping up, the same struggles that we experience over and over. Have you noticed what happens if you keep trying to solve persistent problems in the same way? Have you noticed what happens to those old problems if you keep trying to address them the way you've always addressed them? Have you noticed how you kind of keep having the old problems? The old problems just get older and older. The old priesthood, with its sacrifices, could not do what we needed done. And so did you hear when the text was being read what God did about it? He cast it aside. The tribe of Levi was replaced by the order of Melchizedek, that great king of righteousness and peace, who was a shadow, an appetizer of a foretaste of the one to come, whose name is Jesus. The people of God told stories of this eternal king and priest who was filled with righteousness, who would usher in shalom, wholeness, peace for his people. This eternal king that they longed for was so great that even Abraham had to bring offerings to him. The tribe of Levi was not enough. So it was cast aside in favor of the order of Melchizedek. Verse 18. Yes, the old requirement about the priesthood was set aside because it was weak and useless, for the law never made anything perfect. So pause with me for just a moment. You don't have to raise your hand, you just answer in your spirit. How many of you come this morning and you long for a fresh start? What do I mean by a fresh start? You ever wish, maybe there's a situation you're stuck in or you feel trapped in, and you wish you could just hit reset? You wish you could just begin again? What is that feeling? What is that longing for more? What is that hunger? if you're feeling that this morning, or you're carrying with that with you in your day-to-day life, it could be many things, but at the core, at least a part of it is an awareness that your current strategies for solving your current problems are not currently working. You know what I'm saying? If your plan for how you are going to address these feelings of dissatisfaction, of longing, if your plan for dealing with that was working, it would be working. Are you awake enough to your own life to see that and to admit that? After centuries under the old priesthood and law, it was not working. And when we're faced with these realities, these tiresome, stuck feeling realities, so many of us give in to despair and frustration. But what if there was another way to view these experiences of despair and frustration? The old law and the old priesthood, be not confused, did precisely what God intended it to. We didn't understand it, though. We didn't see it clearly. Our perspective on it was off because our perspectives are so limited and finite and temporary. And so let's reason together for a moment. Let's do some Bible story time. When we received the law originally, we meaning the people of God, his chosen people, we thought we were supposed to keep it. Have any of you ever looked at the commands? You don't have to raise your hand. You can't answer in your spirit. You ever looked at all the rules and commands of God and said, this is what I'm supposed to do, right? Well, I mean, what else? Why else would you give a command? The law was meant to teach us. The law was meant to show us something, to reveal to us something, to prepare us for something. And this is clear from the very beginning if we're willing to shift our perspective just a little bit. So follow the story with me. You guys can actually participate now. What came first? God's creation of a universe and an Adam, meaning A-D-A-M, Adam the man. What came first, that creation or God giving a rule? Creation came first. And you can go and look at the creation account and consider, where is the carrot being dangled here? Did God say, listen, you two, this is a gala apple tree. Now, if you guys don't sin for 100 years, I'm going to give you a Macintosh apple. And then if you don't sin for another 100 years, I'll give you a pink lady. And if you don't sin for 300 years, I will give you the Honey Crisp apple. Do you see what I'm saying? God created from the beginning with abundance, an over-the-top, exaggerated creativity and generosity. And then he says to them, there's one tree that you're not allowed to eat from. That was the only rule. This tree, don't eat from it. You guys remember what he said would happen if you ate from it? You'll die. And so that's like a parent saying, you can do anything you want in the house, just don't run out in the street, because if you run out in the street, you'll die. There's no sense of, if you want to stay my people, if you want me to still love you, there's no carrot being dangled there. There's one rule in the Garden of Eden, and it was for their safety. It was for their protection. It was for their well-being. Could we keep one rule? No, one rule, and we couldn't hold on to it. And a lot of us, very few people in our church are willing to admit they're addicts. I would say about 98% of us are addicts. And what we're addicted to is rules. We want more rules. And from the very beginning, we just couldn't keep one rule. And I don't think any of us have much capacity to keep anything more than that, let alone one. Have you ever been to a school event or something with your kids and they give you this big long list of rules of how you're supposed to conduct yourself? My son just finished his first season playing basketball, and the first night the organization gave us 20 rules that we have to follow to be a part of the organization. And you know what happens when you get to like rule 9 or 10? You ever had this experience? The reading goes to kind of skimming, And by like rule 15, 16, the skimming goes to scanning, and at the end you're like, this is ridiculous. We couldn't even keep one rule, okay? And that was a rule that was given for our safety and our protection after abundance of creation and generosity. Couldn't keep one. Fast forward to the next kind of big event of the Old Testament. Did God give the 10 Commandments before or after he rescued his people from Egypt? Are you sure he didn't say, follow these 10 Commandments for another 100 years and then I'll save you? No. What does God do? He says, you are my people, and I will rescue you with my strong right arm out of Egypt. I will do this. Are the 10 Commandments given to God's people to tell them what they need to do to stay God's people? Or are they given to people who'd been enslaved for 400 years to teach them how to live free? They were already his people, and they were already saved when they got the 10 Commandments. We couldn't keep one rule. Do you think God thought that finally we would keep 10? 10 didn't work. 1 didn't work. What comes after that in the book of Leviticus? 1 rule. Okay, just please listen. 1 rule did not work. 10 rules did not work. God says, here are 613. And I say this with great reverence for the Lord, so don't mishear me. God is not dumb. 1 didn't work. 10 didn't work. If you thought 613 rules were given that we would actually obey them, you have misunderstood the giving of the law. It was never the purpose of the law for us to keep them. God continually increased the demands under the old system to show us that we cannot save ourselves. The old law, the old priests, the old sacrifices were meant to move us to throw up our arms and to cry for rescue. The old law, the old priesthood, the old systems were meant to drive us to our knees and plead to God for his mercy. The rules were meant to expose our hearts so that we might come to God for grace and for mercy and for healing. This is the whole point of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7. Jesus is revealing to them the true purpose of the law. Have you ever noticed how your problems seem to follow you places? If you've made it past your 20s and the same stuff keeps happening in your life and you keep blaming everybody else, isn't that so interesting? What awful luck some of us have had. If that's you, and you keep seeing the same things creep up in your life, and you keep blaming everybody else in your life, I'm pleading with you to wake up. Your heart is your problem. What if the persistent problems in our lives and our repeated failures at solving them are meant to usher us into a new perspective, the same way the law was meant to usher us into a new perspective and a new expectation? What if these persistent chronic problems in our life were meant to bring us to a moment, and maybe even today could be that moment of being able to say, it's time I tried something new. We talked about it last week. Verse 23 reminds us again, these priests, they kept dying. So what would we do? We would bring in new priests. What would the new priests do? They would keep sinning. And then the new priests would become old priests, and they would die. And so we would bring in new priests again to offer the same sacrifices for the same sins, and they kept dying. It wasn't working because, listen, it wasn't meant to work like that. It was meant to prepare us not for more people from the tribe of Levi, but to prepare us for one from the order of Melchizedek. Verse 24, because Jesus lives forever, his priesthood lasts forever. Therefore, he's able once and forever to save those who come to God through him. He lives forever to intercede with God on their behalf. He is the king, high priest we need because he is holy and blameless. Unlike those other priests, he did not need to offer sacrifices every day. Do you see the stark difference? How many times does he have to say forever to communicate this to you? He doesn't have to offer sacrifices every day. He offers one sacrifice once and for all. We don't need new priests because this priest lasts forever. The old priesthood did not work, so Jesus came, not of the tribe of Levi, but the order of Melchizedek, a new priest with a new plan for our old problem. Jesus is the fulfillment of all of the centuries and millennia of preparation. So, to be as clear as I know how to be, the old law and the old priests were meant to show us fundamentally two things. First, our hearts need healing and renovation. The problems in our lives go far beyond our circumstances and down deep into the core of who we are, our hearts. The old law and priests were meant to show us first that our hearts need healing and renovation. And second, that we need someone to intercede for us. In other words, your old problem will not be solved by you. You cannot change your own heart. The old system was meant to prepare us for the coming of Christ. And maybe all of our old failures and frustrations were meant to prepare us for something new now, too. Much about who we are and how we are can change when we come to the realization that Jesus did not come to give us a new law. Do you know that? Jesus did not come to give us a new law. He came to give us new life. And this is why he became a perfect high priest, one who does not sin, one who does not die, one who does not require the repeated sacrifices. And there is much more I would like to say about this. And I will in the weeks to come, but there's a very important place for us to begin. You and I, and this is a we sermon, okay? This isn't like you guys. We have to be willing to admit to ourselves that it's not working. I don't care where you are in your relationship with Jesus this morning. It applies to everyone. You won't overcome a persistent problem without the courage to admit that your solution is not working. Some of you are here this morning and you're trying to understand who Jesus is and what this is all about. I'm really happy you're here if that's you. Are you willing to say, are you willing maybe even to consider that your way of being you is not working? Has your way of being you in this world brought you satisfaction or frustration? Has your way of being you brought you peace, patience, and joy? Or has it brought you anxiety, anger, and depression? Until you can look at your way of life and say, this was weak and useless, you likely won't move forward. And even more so, until you can look at you and not just your circumstances, not just your habits or your behaviors, but you down to the core and say your way of being you is not working. My way of being me it's just not working. It will be very difficult to move forward. We must become a people that lay down our way of doing things and learn to trust our great high priest. He's fulfilled the law and the priesthood by offering a better sacrifice and bringing us into a better covenant. So, I have a real simple invitation for us this morning. I want you to take a moment and just think about a problem in your life that keeps coming up. Can you picture it in your mind? Sometimes I do this, because I'm complicated on the inside. And I try to sort through all these different feelings and all these different longings and pains and try to sort it all out. And lately what I've been trying to do is, could I just mush it into a ball, like a multicolored Play-Doh at the kitchen table or something? Just can I put it all in a ball in my mind, in my imagination, and say, this is it. Somehow it all fits like this. Where are you dissatisfied? Where do you see that it's not working? Where do you see yourself stuck? Where can you see choices you've made that are robbing you of the promised fruit of the Spirit? Can you bundle it and hold it if you can? And if you know the fatigue I'm speaking of, are you willing to admit that it's not working, that your way is not working? If you can, here's the invitations. Now, we have two ways of going forward. Option one is to follow the way of ancient Israel. And I will tell you, this is a Christian church that's part of a Christian tradition. But boy, evangelicals like us love taking the way of ancient Israel. What is the way of ancient Israel? We like to give ourselves more rules. There's no question I get asked more often after sermons than, what should I do? Just give me the new law. Give me the new list of things I can do. So give me some more rules. Rules on rules on rules. We will create rules for the perfect day. We create rules for the perfect diet, rules for the perfect body, rules for the perfect children, so that we could be perfect, perfect, perfect. Let's write out these rules. Let's carve these rules in stone. Let's hang them in front of our county courthouse. Let's put them over the entryway to our homes. Rules on rules on rules. And then let us together grind ourselves to exhaustion. I've been doing this a long time now, you guys, and I'm telling you, this is what we do. We are addicted to the rules, and we want someone to tell us what to do so that at the end of the day we can hang our hat on that hook and say, look how wonderful I am. And then we wonder, after 20 or 30 years of pursuing perfection, why we're so tired, so anxious, and so angry, and the fruit of the Spirit sound like this far-off hope, crushing ourselves under the weight of rules for thousands of years. Is that not what we have done? Option two is to leave the tribe of Levi, leave Egypt, and follow the order of Melchizedek. Turn to the great high priest, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, that eternal priest who intercedes for us from the very throne room of God, the Lion of Judah, who came like a lamb to take away the sins of the world with his own blood. The true and better Melchizedek is inviting you into something new. So if you have ears to hear this morning, turn to him and cry out for help. What do you want me to do? I want you to turn towards him and cry out for help. How do I do that? Turn to him and cry out for help. Call to him for mercy and grace. And let's just see what happens. We've been crushing ourselves under rules for so long. So let's try something new. Let's create space and see if the promises of God will hold true. You know, Jesus promised that he would send us the Spirit of truth who would lead us into all truth. The promise through the prophet Ezekiel was that he would give us a new heart. He would put his Spirit within us. And listen, he promised he would cause us to obey him. So maybe instead of all of the rules and maybe all of the boxes to check, what if we just fell to our knees and said, I'm tired. Help. Give me your mercy. And let's see what might happen. Call to him for mercy. Call to him for grace. Call to him and tell him you're ready for something new. If you're able, please stand with me now and let's pray.